What's up, Liron here, and today we're gonna paint together this painting. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. And today we're gonna paint this painting together based on a reference photo that I took myself. Okay, I was with a friend in the car, and then I saw this beautiful sunlit highway scene to my right, I believe it was, or yeah, to my left. And then I had to take a picture, so I took a picture. And I really liked the result, and I decided to base a painting on it. I did miss a few chances of recording some really high quality painting processes of a realistic painting I did and the interior painting. So with this one, I knew that I have to record it because I felt like something good was gonna happen. It was an interesting process, to say the least. I think I learned a lot of new things. I tried going for a high degree of realism, and I think I got it to work. By the way, the two pigeons that are always outside are outside now. I'm going to show you in just a moment. But in any case, I think I got this to work the way I wanted to, despite having a few hardships and difficulties and just challenges mentally in the beginning. So with that being said, let's jump into the process.
Okay, so I'm starting with the drawing process, which is the only part of this video that I'm going to run in time-lapse. The rest is going to be real time. And so I'm starting with just taking a few measurements. This is double speed, okay? And I'm trying to figure out where to place the horizon line. That's usually one of the first things I try to figure out. And once I have that in place, I let the rest fall in based on that. Sometimes the horizon line isn't as obvious. Sometimes, like even in this example, it's not really visible. It's more like where the buildings meet the rails of the highway or the bridge, rather. And so this is what I'm trying to determine where to place. And you can see I'm measuring quite a bit so that I can figure out where I want to place the buildings, because I want to make sure this is really a point where it could be easy to mess it up and accidentally put the buildings in a place that will lead to a very boring composition that's not really interesting, that is repetitive. You know, if I'm going to put the distances of the buildings from the sides of the painting and between one another, and it's all going to be equal distances, it's going to be a little boring. So this is what I'm trying to figure out now, and once I have the location, the placement I'm pleased with, I'm just drawing them. I may change it up a bit if I'm not pleased with the measurement. I think I didn't leave enough room there, so I may change a few things around. Funny enough, one of the things that I figured out, it started challenging me, and I don't even know if it started challenging me or I became worse at it, or maybe I don't know, I just haven't noticed it up until recently. I find it really challenging at times to draw vertical lines. I just sometimes don't get them to look right. So I really have to focus and take a look at the sides of the page. Now in this example in particular, they aren't perfectly vertical, and I'm just going to grab something for a moment. In this example, sorry, they aren't really vertical because I'm actually grabbing my kneaded eraser, the blue one. I need to play around with something sometimes while narrating this. So in any case, here they aren't completely vertical. They're at a slight angle, which can happen depending on your perspective and how you're viewing your scene. This is something that's very noticeable in pictures and images, and it's not as noticeable when it comes to let's say real life, when you're just observing something, when you see it the way it is, it's not that noticeable. And the reason why is because we have those borders hinting at us and telling us where what is horizontal, let's say. So when you look at real life, there are no borders, there are no edges, so you can't really tell, okay, this is where real life starts and something begins. So that's one thing to take into consideration when you're working from a real life. Then you have to take to I guess determine how you want things to look. You have a bit more freedom. So now I'm not pleased with where I put this line, so I'm erasing it. And I am taking my time with the drawing process. It's going to be quite a lengthy one, which is why I run it at double speed, especially with the cars that are a little more in the middle ground to foreground that you're going to see soon, that I'm going to put in after I finish with the bridge. So I'm really taking my time, and it goes to show you, because a lot of people are discouraged when it comes to drawing, and they say that they are having a hard time with perspective and with drawing people and all of that. And I want to show you that sometimes it's just a matter of taking your time and measuring and comparing. This is the one thing that really, it takes no genius. You just have to really measure. Just arranging the pop filter. Sorry if there's funny noises. But in any case, it's not about being a genius or anything like that. It's just about measuring. You really have to measure and compare constantly. So you'll see soon when I place the cars in, I want to figure out how long everything should be. And when I'm putting these little walls that are just at the edges of the highway, which is what I just drew now, I'm doing it using the ruler. And I'm really carefully measuring it. This is where it's funny. It's funny how it's easy for me to mess up these kinds of instances for some reason. I don't know. Because the problem with drawing with a ruler is the ruler's line is straight. Now, when you draw a line, you can move it around a bit to make sure that it's straight in some areas. But when you're doing it with a ruler, it will just be straight no matter what. You can't change it up as you go along and fix it and correct it. So in some senses, it could be easier. In some senses, it's harder. So now I have this gap from the right, and I want to place in the first car. So what I figured was that its left edge is around the center. Talking about right to left, it's about the center of the painting. And the distance from the center to the car is like halfway. So the car takes up half of the distance from the center to the right side of the page. So this is how I kind of divide it up. And then I'm trying in my mind, in my imagination, to divide the car into separate shapes. So we have the top part of the car, then the back window and the trunk, now the front, the windshield, and then the part that covers the engine. So as you can see, really I'm dividing the car into different mini abstract shapes, and this is what helps me to create its shape, because otherwise it's really impossible to draw an object, like an actual object. What you draw is the abstract shapes composing it, and you'll see how I'm slowly correcting course. It was important for me with this video to show you the nitty-gritty of drawing, because usually I skip it, and you know, some of the details that are very complex, they just take time and it can be a little daunting. So if you're not enjoying this kind of thing, you can skip ahead like 5 or 10 minutes and you'll be way into the painting process. But if you enjoy it, then stay tuned and watch the whole thing. I think it's really nice seeing how this comes together. So this is actually a taxi, and it has this small taxi sign on the roof of the car, which is what I indicated there. Indicated the tail lights, the headlights, now where the wheels are going to be. And I'm using horizontal distances to figure out where the tires, the wheels are going to be. So I'm trying to figure out if it starts, for example, the front tire starts a bit to the right of the mirror, the front mirror, the side mirror, and it ends somewhere around the middle of the engine, the part above the engine. And the left part starts near the end of the back door, and so you kind of have to see the relations between the objects. Now the problem was the car was a bit too low, too squashed. It felt too squashed and too long, elongated. So I drew the bottom line a little lower to fix those proportions. And these are really things you have to solve at this stage, not later on. Now what I'm doing is indicating the shadow. Now because the wheels and the shadow are all going to merge and mingle together, as you can hopefully see in the reference, this is really an important and a good way to represent it, okay? To draw it as one shape. So I barely make a distinction between the tires and the shadow. Now the car that's a little more to the middle car, in between this car and the one that we still haven't drawn, is obstructing some of the shadow from our view, which will lead to, I think, really interesting contrast. But what's important is getting it into the right spot to make sure that we don't have to solve problems later on. Okay, you want to solve these kinds of problems as early as you can, because if you're going to solve them later on, even worse after you're starting to paint, then it's almost it's not that it's almost impossible, it's just harder. So why not do it now? It's all about visual problem solving. So now we have that car in the center. I was a bit sneezed today, so my voice is a little hoarse, I guess. I also painted outside, did a lot of Instagram stories today as of recording this, which is on Monday, so one day before this video is out. A bit nervous to finish with it because it's a long video. It'll take time to export and upload, so I want to make sure that I do everything as much as in advance as possible. So now that brings us to the, so sorry about my voice. That brings us to the last car, which is the one I'm drawing right now, and it's the closest to us, and I think it's gonna be the most interesting looking one. And with the cars in general, you want to take good care of the drawing and the painting and everything because they're close to us. So they're gonna grab a lot of the viewer's attention, probably most of it. And the benefit of having that shape that's dominant or an object that's the focus or the center of attention is that the other things kind of move to the side, and so if you make mistakes, it's not as bad, you know. The buildings in the background, I can't say that I'm fully pleased with how they turned out, and also the foliage. So it's a good thing that the cars turned out exactly like I wanted them to. So now we have all of the top planes of the car and a bit of the window indicated. Now I'm placing the bottom, and I'm trying not to make the same mistake of having the bottom seem too squashed, meaning the car seems, vertically speaking, a little too short, too low, and then horizontally a little too, or vertically rather, depending on your perspective. Anyway, it looks like it's squashed, and I was trying to avoid that kind of look here. So I'm putting in the division between the doors. That's something that is helpful to get for later on. Even if I'm not going to paint it, it's still helpful as a, let's say, a part of the arrangement of the scene, of the car, sorry, just to make sure that I get other things correctly. Now getting in the tires as well. And one last thing, notice how the center car, because it's so dark, I'm not even drawing the tires. They're going to be swallowed up in the shadow. Same thing with this car. Probably won't see too much of them. You will see a bit of them, but not too much. And it's also important to say that this shadow covers up some of the railing that's really at the foreground, okay? Really close to us, the viewer, which is what I'm drawing now. So I want to make sure that I cut it in a way that's attractive to the viewer. Okay, something that will add some interest to the scene and will allow us to see hopefully both sides, that hopefully the shadow is gonna pop out of both sides of this rail thing. So you're gonna see how it connects later on. Now I have this little bush here on the left, and just something to pull the foreground together. This is where I made a bit of a mistake. I made a repeating pattern with the foliage, but I think it'll be fine. I think I'll be able to fix it. Not to fix it, to live with it. I won't be able to fix it. It's done. So now what I'm doing is going back over some of the lines, making them a little stronger, just so later on I can actually see them. Sometimes I'll do some crisscross lines to indicate where it's going to be a little darker, as you've seen in the shadows and the buildings. This is just markings for me. I probably don't even rely on it later on. Now there is this guarding rail on the top of the bridge, so I'm getting that in. And this is really going to be a bit of a longer process, so brace yourself. It's going to be a long video. So now what I'm doing is getting in the bottom parts of the bridge, which is really important because it's what's going to connect the walls to the highway itself. This is actually a highway. Now the bottom part of the highway is going to be really struck by the sunlight, which will make the shadows pop, which will make all of the rest of the elements pop a little, which I think is going to be a nice little effect. that will pull our attention to the cars. And we're almost ready to paint this now. So just passing a few simple lines here and there to indicate this is going to be darker. There are going to be a lot of details there in the shadow that should be done using wet and wet. There's a lot of things to do here, wet and wet. And hopefully the impression you get is accurate. But I think there were quite a few things to improve here. And I actually, thanks to a few painting sessions I recently had, I actually have a few new insights when it comes to my entire approach to painting. So hopefully that'll improve with time. Now I'm spraying a bit of water on the paper, and here's my head. I think it's one of the first time you can see my face with the upper view. So what I did was I spritzed a bit of water on the paper. The goal here is to allow the paint to move more easily and to make it easier for me to do the first wash very, very evenly. Okay, because I am planning for this to be a rather even and simple work. So spritzing the paper with water like this, what it does is it gives you a semi-wet and wet sense. Okay, so it's not going to be wet and wet. Now this feels darker, so I just come back with a wet brush and add some water. But in any case, it's not going to be fully wet and wet. You can see I still have a lot of control, but the paint moves a little easier and there's water already on the paper, which helps tremendously. So my plan with this first wash is to keep things very simple, going top to bottom with some French ultramarine, and then near the bottom I'm going to alternate it and switch it slowly with some nickel azo yellow and some burnt sienna to start warm it up a little. So I'm taking now the yellow, and it takes some time because my palette is contaminated. I'm not afraid to let my paints mix together. I'm not keeping my palette sterile. That's impossible and quite boring to me. But that's fine. You see how slowly I reawaken it. Now, there is quite a lot of water and blue paint, so you can see it slowly leaking because I'm at a bit of an angle here. So what I'm doing is going back over the top part of the yellow areas, and you'll see this in just a moment. And eliminating some of that bleeding of the blue into the yellow, as you see now. And my plan basically for this is to have the road be very, again, shiny, struck by the sunlight, and then the buildings in the background and that bridge, they're supposed to be very dim and muted and sent more to the background. That's my main plan. Now there is a bit of excess moist here, and you can see me picking it up with a dry brush. Now you have to be careful not to pick it up too much, but you don't want to leave it there because then it will puddle and it may lead to some backgrounds. With cheaper type of paper you would already get backgrounds, but because I'm using Saunders Waterford, which is a high quality paper, you don't get the backgrounds here. Now I froze because I'm trying to figure out how dark what I'm doing should be, but in any case, it's important to take into consideration. Now I'm testing it out on a test paper. So the paper is really one of the most important ingredients, and you want to make sure you use good paper. So because otherwise the paint's it's gonna just be bad. Now I'm using a bit of I'm using a nice sized brush. This is size 12 silver black velvet. My plan here is to go pretty light on these buildings. Now it may seem a little dark. That's because it's going to dry much lighter. That's how it works in watercolor. They dry much lighter than they appear to be. Because of all of the water in the mixture, that's what happens. So slowly building it up. Now I need to take into consideration the second building, and I need to alternate between the two. And I'm trying to mix more and more of this same color, this gray. And I mentioned this in a reply to a comment that I did, I think, today. What I do really is I build my grays and my blacks using all of my primary colors. So to create a black color here, I'll just use my colors, which are French ultramarine, alizarin crimson, permanent alizarin crimson, I believe by SAA, and nickel azo yellow. So what I'm doing is creating grays from all of my primaries. That way it will always be harmonious. You won't lose the color harmony because you're using the same three paints, and I find that it works so much better for me this way. So yeah, so that's how I choose my colors very easily. I'm gonna post a separate video talking about shadow colors, because a lot of people have been asking me how I choose my shadow colors. Notice, by the way, on the left, I have this nice bead on the building, and that's going to keep it alive in the meantime as I work on the building on the right. And I'm very aware of that edge. So in any case, back to what I was saying, the shadow colors, I just use my primaries really. I love to put a lot of variety of color in the shadows, but that's really down to your personal stylistic choice. So do what you love to look at. This is my approach to painting in general. I paint what I enjoy looking at, okay? I don't overcomplicate the thing. I just, if there's a style I enjoy in particular or a certain approach, that's what I'm trying to do. And that way I enjoy my work a lot, which is important to me. So now I'm connecting all of everything in the background. I'm connecting it all together. So these buildings are going to connect with the bridge there. And the reason is that I want some unity, okay? I want it to look unified and even. And now I'm bringing a lot of water into the mixture because I need to make sure that nothing dries on me. I need to put in a few fences as well, the guarding guardrail, I don't know what you call it exactly, but I'm going to put it in here while the buildings are still wet, which is really important because I want these parts to merge together. So I'm kind of taking a risk changing to a rigger brush now, but that's fine. And it's funny because I was really inaccurate, but now you can't even notice it, but I really noticed it back then. And now I'm adding these small lines indicating the guardrail, and then I'm quickly gonna switch back to a larger brush that was in my mouth the whole time, I believe, and put in the buildings in the background and quickly connect the two buildings together. Okay, so there's a lot of speed involved here. What you see now is real time. So sometimes I run my videos faster, so it may seem slow, but that's really fast. I have to work really fast. Now, another advantage to working with just 3 colors is speed. This is why I constantly recommend, especially if you're working outside or doing a bit of a complex painting, using a minimal palette is really useful for that. It just shortens your decision-making process. It's like, okay, do I want a cool color or a warm color? What's the value? And that's it, you're done, you're good to go. So if I want a shadow to be cool, I'm using my blue. If I want it to be warm, I'm using my red or yellow. That's all there is to it. Now notice how I'm mixing a lot of phthalo blue here. So my bad, I mentioned French ultramarine, but there's actually quite a lot of phthalo blue in it. And it just goes to show you how little of an importance I have when it comes to colors. I give colors. It's really secondary. You could use any color. You don't even have to limit yourself to 3. You could use a variation of warm and cool primaries. That's one of the things that really like the split primary palette. That's the smartest way to go, I think, if you want to be able to mix any color you want. Sometimes I'm just not interested in mixing any color. I'm more interested in just creating what I want. So here's where I start to lose it a bit, trying to build up some of the details here, wet and wet. There's a sign that's a little lighter, so I'm trying to actually do that. And here's a good little technique for you. So if I want to get this sign to be lighter, I'm painting around it, and then what I'm going to do is wet the brush, come back with the pure clean water and put it over the sign. This is what I'm doing right now, and this way it's going to be a little lighter, you see. So the area, the general area, because it's wet and wet, and we don't have full control, it's not going to be completely wet, but still. Now, because I was afraid I'm going to lose the wash, because it took a long time, I just used my spray bottle once again, and you can see it created some nice textures in there, interesting spots, which I like. And now I'm really thinking and considering my next move. So I'm mixing up a bit of phthalo blue and some of the quinacridone rose. What I'm trying to do is get some wet and wet action going, and to do that I really need to use very thick paint because I need to beat all the wetness or overpower all the wetness that's in the paper. Okay. So sometimes you'll have to mix a mixture that's much thicker than you think you would. Now, this is almost dry paint. It doesn't really move on my palette. Just to get in those details. Now, I might have been a little too early with that because I'll need to darken the whole thing up. So this is where I messed it up a little and lost some of the impression. And when I just realized this now, actually, seeing this later on, it's just too strong of a contrast that isn't really necessary here. So either darken the whole thing up and then add these, or just wait till the next wash. But in any case, I learned a lot from this one. And the reason I'm not worried about the edge near the bottom is I don't remember, either it's going to be darker or this is my edge, in fact, because there's going to be a highlight there. So we're going to find out in just a moment. I believe there's a highlight in there, so I'm not too worried about that. If the current wash is going to switch into a very dark paint, or it's going to stop there, then you have nothing to worry about in terms of losing the edge or having the edge dry, because that means you're finished with the wash anyway. So yeah, as I suspected, I'm actually leaving a highlight there. It's not going to be as light as it is now. You see the highlight between what I'm painting now and the top area. This sliver of light, it's not going to be as light probably as it is now. I will kill some of it with a very light wash. But I'm just starting with it now. And now, because I'm using paint that's a little darker now and a little less watered down, I have to be a bit quick with the bottom edge of this. And furthermore, I think it has a bit of darkness in it, so I may darken things up a bit and then come back with this darker paint and do it a bit wet and wet. I think, in fact, this is what I'm going to do from top to bottom, to adjust the the contrast between the highlight and the shadow. So yeah, it's a bit of a risk again, because the contrast is a little too strong. Sorry about the noises. I'm just placing things on the desk makes this weird noise. I don't know, with the mic, because the microphone is connected to the arm that's connected to the table. So yeah, my voice is really getting tired. Now we're about almost halfway through. We're past the third, but not yet in the halfway point. So now I'm adding this lower wall, okay? And it's going to be a bit warmer. So if you notice, there's a gradual change from top to bottom. So top is really dim, muted, hazy. Then I'm adding a bit more red to it. And then there's the wall that's a little more purple-ish. And now I'm adding this darker wall that's a little more orange. So I'm slowly adding a bit more yellow to the mix. Now, notice how there's a bit of a waviness to the paper. The paint, the initial wash dried completely, but the second wash is what made it buckle a little more again. So you have to know how to either let it dry or learn how to work with the paper buckling. And that's fine. That's just part of it. A lot of painters, especially working outside, continue to work on the paint that's fully buckled. You have no choice, really, at times. So when you don't have the luxury of painting inside the studio and, just letting it dry and you're working from a photo. So when you don't have that luxury, you actually have to work fast. Now, this is where the wall is connecting to the highway. The highway is not going to be as light as it is right now. I'm going to add a very pale orange wash to it. And I have to be careful not to touch the fence too much, because that may reawaken the paint. I let it dry for a few moments. And I'm also negative painting around the cars. Now, I don't start to work on the right section because I don't have to. It's separated. And it's my opportunity to focus on the part on the left. If I start involving the right part, now I have to worry about two edges, which is really counterproductive. So working on the space that I currently need to work on, and then I move on to the next. And also I need to know where to stop, because there's going to be a bit of a highlight on the fence that's close to us. Okay, so you see that I'm stopping right there and creating this straight line. And covering up the shadow of the car where I can, because it's going to be darker in any case, so it doesn't matter. Connecting this hopefully also to the shadow of the car. Oh yeah, and I go over this front fence. I guess I figured that the highlight there doesn't have to be that light, or I'll just dab it out now because I made a mistake. Yeah, so I'm dabbing it out. I made a mistake. Shouldn't have covered this whole area. And now I'm going back and I'm creating that clean edge again. So again, things can be corrected even with watercolor. You can still fix some mistakes as long as you have a paper towel handy, or toilet paper. I recommend something that doesn't drop particles into the paint, because that can ruin it. Now I made this odd decision to start working on the right side, despite still having the lower edge open. So I don't know, sometimes I just don't pay attention. Should have probably finished the bottom part and then do it. But maybe I figured that there's going to be a lot of shadows there, so it's fine. Now the most important part I want to make sure is that I don't lose the highlights on the tops of the cars. So that's what's really going to make this shine and make us want to focus on the cars. And luckily the bottom part hasn't dried. And now I can just kind of go over it quickly. It's going to be obstructed by the fence. So I'm not too worried about it. That's probably why I wasn't too worried about it back then either. It's all going to be obstructed by a fence that's in the foreground. So now I decided to start working on the shadows in the cars. And the reason why is that it's going to help me see the rest of the values cleanly. Sometimes I'm going to have a hard time with large scenes. So what I do is I choose one thing that I can tell how light or dark it is, and then I go with that, because that will allow me to then later on compare everything to this value that I'm certain of, and have it be more accurate with the rest of the picture. It's almost like with the painting. It's almost like tuning a guitar. If you're playing a guitar, you're gonna love this analogy. And you have one of the strings that's properly tuned, and then you use that to tune all the rest. What do you call it? Relative tuning. So you tune all of the guitar relative to one string. Even if it's not accurate, at least it's going to be accurate as a standalone instrument. So the same goes here. I have one value that I know how to assess how dark or light it is. I do that, and then everything else is relative to that. So just a little gimmick or trick for you to to do until you really train your eye to see values. Because for me, I've been doing it for I guess 4 years now, almost. Let's say 2.5 years really seriously. And the one thing I learned from watercolor, let's say the main thing I learned, is how to observe values. And still, I have a long way to go, and many times I cannot tell how dark or light what I'm looking at is. There's so much illusion going on, and it's so hard to disconnect from the matrix, if you will. So this is just a skill that's important to have. But as a crutch, you have the viewfinders, those squares that help you isolate a part and see it for what it is, see the color for what it is. And you could say it's a crutch, you could say it's cheating, but I don't believe that, actually. I think that as long as I only care about the final result. If the final result is something you like and you feel that you're pleased with, I think that's all that matters, really. What I'm gonna do now is probably take a quick break, bring a glass of water so that I don't completely lose my voice, and then I'll continue. So moving on with the process now. Just had a sip of water, much needed. Sip of glass of water. Now notice how I did a small shadow under the sign of the taxi on the roof of the car. And I also negative painted around the side mirror. These are all important elements that will really help us bring out the shape of the car and help the viewer read it better. Okay. I took another sip of my water. I just wanted to tell you, you've been asking for a lot of long tutorials, like long full tutorials. So let me know what you think of this one, because it really is a long tutorial. The video is going to end up being about 1 hour and 15 minutes, I think. So, sorry, let me know what you think of that. So next up, and you see me negative painting around the bumper and all of the small details of the car. And it's all about, just like I talked about earlier, seeing the values for what they are. And I do think that with time and with practice, you'll start seeing, at least I hope so, because I'm still at it, you'll start seeing values more cleanly. There really is a lot to learn. I forgot how to talk for a moment, sorry. There really is a lot to learn when it comes to that and seeing reality for what it is. Now, I darkened this part a little bit because I felt like the or either I planned it, I don't remember, but I think, yeah, I planned this. So I knew that it's not dark enough, and I wanted to add another glaze that's gonna make it a little darker, but most importantly, not darker than the wall under it. Okay, there are 2 layers of walls there, and the bottom wall should be darker. So I wanted to make sure that I don't make it darker than that. And then I negative paint around the top part of the taxi or cab, and that really brings out its shape. Okay, so that's really an important part here that I wanted to make sure that I get right. This is probably what indicated to me that I need to do that. Now I'm going to blow my nose in a moment because I don't know, I think I'm developing a bit of sickness. The weather is becoming colder and it's a bit annoying, honestly. So I hope at the very least you enjoy the authenticity of this, the audio of this video. So yeah, it's a bit of everyone's sick really around, not around me, but like friends over the phone told me they're sick. And a lot of people. By the way, notice something really creepy. If you take a look at the palette on the right, there's actually a face in it. Look at the top part of the palette. That there's actually a face. I'm gonna mark the timestamp because I want to show this clip on Instagram. It's gonna be funny. Face in palette. I'm actually writing a note. So that's going to be around 34 minutes. It's funny, there's actually a face there in the palette that you can see with the nose and the pink shape. It's really weird. So in any case, yeah. Now this car is much, much darker. And so I want to get that punchy contrast and connect it immediately to the shadow. And this will really bring forward its shape. It's just a darker colored car. So the car at the back is white, which is why its shadow is kind of light. This car is dark red, so it becomes much, much darker when you look at its shadowy side. So this is something, yeah. Now, talking about Instagram, I really upped my game there, and I'm posting so much. So if you want to see more live updates or more about my daily life and my art and work in progress and things like this. Like just today I painted outside and I shared a lot of the process there and also some fun adventures. Actually, I talked to the guy of whose car I painted and he bought the painting from me on the spot. This is like the 3rd or 4th time that happens, which is very rewarding. So yeah, if you want to see these adventures, make sure you follow me on Instagram. I think that's the main place, Instagram or Facebook as well. I post this all on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat as well. So whichever you prefer. Also, one thing I didn't mention for a while was my podcast. So I do hope you check it out as well. I think it's really improving with time. And I'm talking about deeper topics there like art and creativity. I actually need to think about how to lighten it up a bit. Because I want to, not because like there's no strategy behind it. I just want to. I want to talk about lighter and more fun topics, I guess. Water. Water is good. And next up, all we have left to do is I'm going to darken this car a bit more. I'm going to make use of the fact that it's still a bit wet to put in shadows that will slowly melt into the paint. And I also figured based on the reference that some parts of it are darker, and I wanted to get that impression in there. So I'm darkening it up, and in fact I'm only skipping the tire because it is showing a bit in the reference. The tire and some details of the front of the car. And that will create a very nice contrast with the car that's most at the front, because you can see now its shape is really popping. And you can see now why I decided to work on the cars at this stage, because they help me determine how dark or light the other areas of the painting should be. Okay, which is really a nice little thing to make use of, especially when the values are a bit challenging, you're not sure what you're looking at. So yeah, there are actually a few details there in the shadow, like the steering wheel, and you can see all of this from afar. So I'm trying to get a loose impression of that without pushing it too much. Now the next part would be to work on the top side of the car and the front that are a little more struck or hit by the sun. So this part is going to show the true color of the car, like literally the true color, and that is red. It's bright, strong, not bright, bright's the wrong word because it is dark. It's dark, strong red. And it's funny how when you see the true color at the top of the car, your brain will know how to complete the information and imagine that the shaded part is also the same color. You're gonna see this effect in a few moments when the paint settles in, and you can kind of figure out, oh, I'm looking at a red car. Okay, it's good to know. So yeah, now I'm putting in that red there. I left a bit of highlight there on the left. Not sure why. I don't remember exactly what was there. And it seems like, oh yeah, it was just a bit lighter there. So I came back with a wet brush and allowed it to diffuse evenly there. So yeah, when you're doing these strong contrasty shapes, it's important to notice the shape itself, like the outline. It has to work. And if you're gonna make mistakes, then they're gonna show later on. So it's important to pay attention to that and make sure there isn't anything too critical or too big of a mistake somewhere. So now I'm just following the values I see there. I'll probably need to strengthen that red to really indicate that it is a red. Okay, so hopefully that'll work out nicely. By the way, sorry about the difference in quality in audio between the different parts of the video, I suppose, because the introduction, I recorded using my iPhone without a mic, and then this narration I record with an actual mic. So this is why there are a bit of gaps, let's say, in the quality of the audio, but hopefully everything is acceptable at least. So yeah, I've been really using your feedback and feedback of followers on Instagram to make sure that I create content that's interesting for people. I slowly learn how to learn from your feedback. So I learn how to see what you respond to best and what you learn from, and then and then reacting to that and posting content that's relevant. So like I noticed a lot of people have been talking to me about what was it? It's like comparing their ability to other artists and to other painters, and especially people who have been doing it for much longer than them. And it just, the thought of someone giving up because of such a thing really pains me. Can I say that? Can I say something pains me? In any case, it gives me a lot of pain knowing that someone just quits or doesn't do the work they want. By the way, notice how I'm putting in the wet and wet taillight in red. Cool, huh? So it pains me to think that someone's quitting because of what other people's art looks like. You should never be discouraged by seeing people that are further along, let's say, than you. Because all of these people have been practicing, and a lot of them come from humble beginnings. That's what's important to remember. It's easy seeing the success and thinking, oh, it was always like this. It's not true. And it's funny, really. I don't believe in a lot of natural talent. I do believe, for example, in my case, I think that drawing specific types of shapes came a little more naturally to me. Or maybe the ability to understand what I'm drawing came a little more easily for me, because I think I have high visual skills, very developed. So I can rotate shapes in my imagination to quite surprising levels of accuracy. But painting didn't come naturally at all. And even drawing, when it comes to portraits, I'm really struggling. But painting really didn't come naturally to me. If you go back to some of the really old videos on my channel, and by the way, notice again, I'm connecting the shadow to the car itself, the cast shadow, just creates a more attractive shape. You don't need to split up every shape you see. So if you look at some of my earliest videos, you will notice how I was terrible at painting. I have a painting of Link from The Legend of Zelda, from Breath of the Wild, and it was one of my first watercolor paintings, and I don't delete anything. I keep it all up there, and the reason why is I don't care if people see it. I'm actually happy about people seeing it, because then when someone says, how did you get so good, I can just send them a video and tell them, check this out. This video from 2014 shows you that I started from nothing. So when it comes to painting, really a very humble beginning. It wasn't easy for me to get started, and if at least that can inspire someone else, and I'm really happy. So I posted this motivational quote on Instagram that says that comparing your art to others is the quickest way to lose motivation. And I really believe that. Now, most of the comments really agreed with it. Some mentioned the nuance that I think is important, and that is it's okay to observe other people's work and to learn from it. It's not just okay, it's actually necessary. But you have to be smart about it and have positive thoughts, meaning focusing on what you do know and what you could do to improve, rather than focusing on this guy is so much better than me or this gal is so much better than me. No, that's the wrong way to think about it. Okay. So I hope at least my work can encourage you in that sense of showing you I wasn't that good, really. It took me a long time to get to where I am, and I still have a long way to go. So now I'm trying to bring the bridge and the guarding rail a little closer to us than the buildings, because they are a bit darker. So I'm going over them with a darker wash, and I'm completely messing up the lines here. Totally not on it. That happens sometimes, you mess up a main line and then it kind of gets lost in the overall composition and you forget about it. You'll notice later on, it's just the cars are interesting and the rest is not. It's funny how the center car is almost done, really. The top and bottom cars still need some shadows in them. So connecting it, and then I'm going to darken the whole thing. This is really the most boring stage of the painting, and it's the one where people give up, and this is actually another note to myself to make a post on people giving up on a painting before they should, on ugly stage of the painting stage, and not giving up. Because people see the painting and they're like, I don't get it. What is that? What did I do? It doesn't look like the reference at all. And that happens if you compare this to the reference. There are quite a lot of differences. So what? You still have the chance. I mean, it's not going to look the same immediately. That's the thing. And some parts here need darkening, like this whole freaking bridge. And some parts need maybe lifting, but as long as, like, generally speaking, as long as you didn't go too dark, there's still hope. You're still in the process. So it's like, it's not that your painting is bad, you just didn't finish it yet, and that's a good quote to use on Instagram. It's not that I'm full of insights today. It's not that your painting is bad. Now you get to see my work process. Painting is bad. You just didn't finish it yet. You just didn't finish it yet. I can't believe I'm doing this while narrating a video. Finish it yet. So yeah, it's just that ideas like this keep popping into my mind, and I like to write them down immediately to make sure I don't lose them. So yeah, now you saw I negative painted around the base of the leg of the bridge. That's because there's a bit of a lighter area then. I wasn't sure how to approach it, so I just painted around it. Then I'm going to come back with damp brush and cover it up, and then hopefully I'll get the effect I want. I really got lost with this part. These kinds of things, like lots of darks and then variations in the dark, really challenge me. But anyway, back to our little story here. I just wanted to say I'm very pleased about sharing more of my work process with you. AKA showing you behind the scenes on Instagram and Snapchat and other platforms that are a bit quicker. So I'm always going to be interested in the main content here that I do on YouTube. But then again, I'm creating these smaller and quicker snippets of content on Instagram that will hopefully attract attention to the YouTube channel. Now what I'm doing is there's a bit of a tree there. I think it's a couple of trees. So I'm putting it in there, and my plan is for the trees in the background, they're going to be quite muted, so I'm using all of my primaries and maybe pushing it ever so slightly towards green, okay? So it's going to be lots of blue, lots of yellow, and then a bit of red to mute it down, okay? This is how you create browns and grays, so that's my plan for the farther ones. And then for the closer ones, I will use a purer green, and that'll create the illusion of aerial perspective, meaning because of the particles in the air, you don't get to see all of the details of the objects that are farther away. and blowing my nose. So now I'm putting in another smaller kind of bush or tree in the background there. And it's just because I saw it in the reference. So you don't have to completely copy what you see, and sometimes it's not recommended. But with this one, I felt it'll work nicely. The thing I think I could have improved was actually the trees in the foreground. Not necessarily the trees in the foreground, but just the fact that I felt like the trees are creating a pattern and they don't appear to be random. So there's one on the left, one on the right, and then in the foreground I also accidentally did one on the left and one on the right. So this is something I'll fix later on. So now basically what I have to do is add some more details to the bridge, add the darker shadows to the cars, add all of the details in the foreground, and we're done with this. Okay, that's all that's left for this process. The main part that will require most of my focus is the cars and their shadows, a bit of the bridge. The foreground is going to be relatively easy because it's just going to be random patterns again of grass and stuff like that. So yeah, so now I'm mixing a very dark warm color, and that is for the fence at the foreground, I believe. I'm going to put it in now, and it's a bit of a scary part because it's just a straight line, and notice how careful I am with it. I don't want to cover and kill the highlight, but I also don't want it to go too low, so it's a bit of a thin rail. It's a double rail, so you have this one and then another one under it, and then there are some lines connecting the two, and on top of that we have the foliage. So I want to make sure that I get all of that in as accurately as possible, and it should be thicker, so I'm going over it once again. And it's important to remember that the cars are the center of interest, but this is still the foreground. So you want to keep it balanced. You want to make sure that it's accurate enough, and this shows you also, I think, an interesting composition or a compositional choice. Usually, you will see. Well, I don't want to say usually, but many times you'll see the center of interest in the foreground or closest to us. And here really we have a center of interest that's a bit more in the distance. It's definitely not a background or a backdrop, but it is a mid-ground, good mid-ground, I would say. So now I'm pulling in those details of the guarding rail. Just a bit of, straight lines there going vertically. And this part can be dry brushed because it's going to be really covered by the foliage. What I like about dry brush is that it creates a stroke that isn't too stressed. So your eye won't necessarily go there very easily. So that's a good thing, especially edges that are done with a dry brush. Even though I just killed the dry brush element of it, but whatever. I'm gonna do some dry brush for the bushes and stuff like that. So now I'm starting to mix a bit of green, and I'm probably going for those I guess shrubs and trees in the foreground. There's a bit of along the highway, there's a bit of that. What I was actually, the way I was taking this picture was, we've exited the highway, so the exit split to the right, but we're still going parallel to the highway because we're going up on a bridge and then going to turn left. So what happened was I got a view of the highway from the side. So alongside these guarding rails, there were these small trees and foliage elements. So I'm just using a dry brush, putting in random patterns, and pulling in some lines as well in there to make it look like branches. Okay, I'm gonna do more of the lines in just a moment. Right now it's just some random patterns, and pulling in those thin lines really helps with creating the illusion of some random texture and leaves and all sorts of details there. By the way, a quick poll. What kind of accent would you say I have if you had to place it? I've been getting asked that question a lot. Like, where are you from? Because my home, I guess my original language is Hebrew, so it's kind of a mess with the accent. I'm bringing the Hebrew accent to the English, but then some of it is eliminated, so it's not as accentuated. So I'm just curious do I, and I also got once that I remind someone of a Pennsylvania accent, like, I don't know. So if I have a particular accent, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts, so let me know in a comment below. There's just all sorts of fun things that interests me. And while you're at it, if you want to share where you're from, that could be maybe an interesting I don't know, just thing to mention in the comment, because I do know a lot of people from all around the world watch this. I've seen a lot of people from mostly from the US and then some from UK, but then I have a lot of followers from countries that I wouldn't think about first, like a lot of African countries, Middle Eastern, which makes sense as well, I guess. And yeah, and I'm really not into politics, but what I can say is that I love the fact that I can cleanly communicate with anyone around the world. And even, unfortunately, Israel has a lot of, I guess, enemies. I hate to say that because no one's really my enemy. So I'm just happy that I'm able to communicate with, like, I have tons of followers from Saudi Arabia, which is really cool. Some of the nicest people, some of the nicest people. I get so many comments from people from all sorts of countries that you wouldn't, if you read the news and you watch the news, you'd think like, I just hate the fact that countries are enemies, but people really aren't. I don't really have any enemies, and I'm happy to communicate with anyone and to inspire as many people as I can. Really, that's my goal. So yeah. So it's just so cool that the internet allows us to do that and to really communicate with everyone and anyone. And yeah, it's just really, it makes me happy. And that's my point. So now I'm putting in some dry brush. Honestly, I didn't know what to do with that friggin' bridge. I just tried to put something there. It drove me nuts, the whole process. So yeah, I'm just putting in some dry brush details. The top part should probably be a little darker, painting around the concrete huge, I guess, supporting beam or pole or whatever that thing is, supporting leg. With these kinds of things, you just have at times, and I wasn't able to do that, if I'm honest with myself. If I'm being honest with myself, I wasn't able to do that. But what you should do is just disconnect from what you see and look at it as abstract shapes. Is it light? Is it dark? Is it round? Is it a straight line? Is it a curved line? And that's all you should be thinking about, because if you try to actually paint reality, it's impossible. This is really, I think, the main pitfall when drawing portraits as well. It's so easy to be tempted into drawing what you think a nose looks like, for example, or what you think a hand looks like, if we're talking about a human figure. And it's really, the most beneficial thing is to just disconnect from all of that and to just look at what's in front of you, really. And I kind of failed in doing that. I was too in the process. But there is something playing to my advantage here, and I'm going to tell you in just a moment. What plays to my advantage here is the cars and the fact that they're the main point of interest here. And because of that, people are going to be forgiving when it comes to, let's say, the shape of the bridge. Maybe it's a little skewed. It's a little, people aren't going to really notice that. Now, one thing that I did mention about the foliage is the front, the foreground and the background kind of mimic each other. I don't know if I like it that much, because there are two main chunks of trees in the background, and then there are two main chunks of trees in the foreground. And so that's not necessarily the best way of doing it, but there's only so much you can control, I suppose. But still very happy with the result. And yeah, this one's almost done. Just notice how I'm saving the best for the actual cars. I jumped right into the cars after doing some minor details, and then I'm saving the final touches to the end. And we're quite close to the end. We're about, I think, 3/4 done with this. Really a long process, and we got to cover a lot of topics here. So if you're still watching, I want to thank you so much. It means the world to me. Let me know if you do in a comment below. So yeah, it kind of reminds me that I want to do some more live videos, some more. I'm not doing any now, so right now. So I want to start doing them on Twitch, which is a live streaming platform, and on Instagram, probably another place that's going to be easy. I'm just trying to think about what type of content would be best. On Instagram, I do have a following already, so I could do just Q&A or something simple like that. On Twitch, I don't have that much of a following, so maybe I can just start turning on the camera as I'm working, even outside or inside, and just show what I'm doing and seeing how that develops. It's just a world I want to get a bit into, because I do see that there's a lot of attention there. And my goal is to get your attention as much as possible, because I want to be big someday and reach as many people as possible. It's really a topic that's been on my mind a lot recently. It's like the whole idea that I have in my mind of being able to influence millions of people and reach millions of people and encourage them to create. And it's funny because the way to get there is to just keep doing what I'm doing right now and treat you guys like you're those million people that I'm reaching. Like, how arbitrary of a number is million? Like 35,000 followers. That's insane, and I'm so grateful. It's so many people. When you imagine maybe a room full of this amount of people, it's inconceivable, really. So I really want to thank you for watching the videos and for supporting me in any way possible, for getting the courses and the books. This is literally my income is based on that. So that's just amazing. And how the internet allows us to turn our passions into income. I remember I quit my high-tech job about, I guess now it's 2 years now, maybe. And I'm at a point where I'm making as much as I made there, I guess, which wasn't a lot. I didn't get it. Was like a junior position, but that's still quite amazing. So, I'm really thankful for everything, all of the support. It really, really is very humbling and I'm just, even in the last few weeks and months, I really feel it. I just wake up and I'm so grateful for what I have and for the ability to share what I love and to get feedback and enjoy the back and forth communication. So really, I have only you to thank for that. And hopefully I'm able to inspire and to help and to teach. So these are the things I'm trying to do. So now enough with the emotional drama, and let's go back to the painting process. I'm doing the final details of the car. Now, the one thing I figured right now is that the tires are way too small, and I should probably make them larger, and hopefully I will. Honestly, I don't remember if I did. Now, you see me stop a lot. And when you see me stop, I'm really weighing my options and thinking about what should I be doing now. And that's really a part of the process. Things don't come easy. It takes a lot of work. And even when you have a lot of experience, I still have to stop every few moments and figure out if I'm in the right track, if I'm doing things correctly. And hopefully up until this point, the impression is clear and it is clear to you what you're looking at and it looks good. But it really takes a lot of effort sometimes. And sometimes I'll be completely happy and carefree and the result is still going to be beautiful and it's going to be some really nice paintings that I produce. So it really alternates between these few, I guess, scenarios. So with this one, I really had to be a little focused. I was enjoying the process, but I had to be really focused. Now I'm putting in that tail light and I think the main shadow should be a little darker, although I don't remember if I darken it, but it definitely should be a little darker there, I think. The mid values is what really challenges me the most, because some situations I can never tell if it's dark enough or it isn't. Now I put the yellow for the taxi sign. What we have here is not yellow cabs, we have just a white cab with yellow sign on the roof of it. And now I'm darkening some of the shadow. That probably should be a little darker as well. The question is, will I darken the main shadow on the side of the car? I'm not sure at all. And that's the funny part about narrating these processes maybe a week or two after you finish them. I've been doing a lot of, I guess I gained a bit of a, I think, higher level insight, and that is I'm alternating between doing large full pieces and doing quicker, more thumbnail like paintings. And I find that this really helps me because when I work on a painting like this one that's full of details and I have to be really careful and measured and deliberate, I learn how to finalize a work and make it look good and very tight, I guess, airtight, and everything's good. And then when I do the quick exercises, I'm able to focus more on the basics of in the general theme of the scene. And is it like the composition and the arrangement and the edges and all of those good stuff that actually make a scene look good. And this makes me happy. I found that really I can tell when I need to make the switch. So I'd be working on 2 or 3 very highly detailed paintings, and then I'll take a break from that for a day or two and move on to, because those paintings will take like 2 or 3 weeks. Then for a day or two I do thumbnails or very quick studies of other artists or studies that I do of scenes. And I find that this is a good recipe for constant improvement. I find that it actually helps me to improve on a regular basis. So I'm slowly starting to get the hang of what it takes on a more macro level to improve. Because when you're just starting out and when you're the first time you're at it, it's very easy to get discouraged and not to realize what you should be doing to improve. You can get lost in the process and feel like there's months going by and you see no improvement. And for me, what I think happened in the latest months is I am able to tell my improvement and tell when I'm stuck, and even notice sticking points, that recurring mistakes, things that I do out of autopilot without thinking that aren't necessarily true. Like my main insight from today, I had a really major one, and that is that I'm not shackled to one work method. So I just put the paint wherever I wanted today, and I had a much more fun and loose and freeing painting process. So that's really important. And notice how I don't know what I'm doing with the tires here and the shadow. I'm just trying to figure it out slowly. So I'm starting dark and light, and then I'm adding a bit of dark, and then I'm adding a bit of water, and I'm trying to lift, and I'm trying to put back some more details. So sometimes you don't know how to approach a painting, and that's fine. You have to try it out and see, and you'll discover you'll discover the right way of doing things. You don't have a guidebook for everything, really. If you're taking workshops and lessons with someone you trust and that's really where you want to be, then yes, you have a bit more of an advantage, I guess. You get personalized feedback. But when you're at it on your own, and really I didn't take any official workshop. I do plan on taking a few in the future, but I learned everything online. You have to be very keen about these things. You have to have a keen eye and slowly develop that ability to give yourself criticism. Where I got lucky is I have Instagram now, so I have quite a lot of followers there and good engagement. And when I post something, it actually gains responses. So I can tell by the amount of likes and by the amount of comments how much the artwork I'm working on is hitting the audience the way I want it to. So I slowly developed this third sense of knowing how well I'm doing, which is really nice to have. And I think Mark talks about it in Draw Mix Paint. I'm going to drink some water. In Draw Mix Paint, the oil channel, he talks about it too. He says how it's really hard sometimes to tell how well you're doing, or how well your painting can be read by the viewer. But what can happen is by developing a network of people that, and by the way, you see I finally darkened this shadow, it's about time. By developing a network of people that can give you feedback, you get to see through their eyes your painting. So then you know if it's good and what to improve through their eyes. So you learn from third party, I guess, not third party, second hand experience. Let's say how good your painting, how good your painting is, or how well you're doing. So now I'm trying to darken this car as well, and we're almost done. Really, we have about a minute left, less than a minute. And notice how these two shadows really corrected everything, and now it sits in its right place in terms of the value. It's as dark as it should be, and it reads much better. So this is almost really done. I'm gonna add a bit of a stronger touch of red to there, and I'm gonna sign this. And this is really the end. I'm signing at a very dark area, and it's half wet and wet signature, because I couldn't find any other place to put it. So yeah. So here's the final result. Now we can wrap it up. Okay, so I just finished with this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process, and I hope you learned something new. I'm very pleased with it. I am aware that it's a bit hard for me to tell how accurate or inaccurate I was. When I actually look back and compare different areas of the painting to the original reference, I can see that this value is accurate, and this shadow is accurate, and this wall is accurate, and this building is accurate. I can't sometimes see the whole thing, but taking a few steps back actually helps me. So when I do that, I can see that I was pretty dead on, especially here in the main area of interest. So that's a good thing. I was considering adding another car here, kind of at the left. It isn't a reference, and it could have been nice, but I don't know, maybe it's too much with this bush here, so I'd rather leave it like that. And also one more interesting thing I think with this one is it shows you how with just a few colors and lots of grays and in-betweens, but a few touches of pure green, pure red, you can get or even pure yellow a bit here for the taxi, you can get a nice, interesting impression of the scene and have it be interesting despite the grayness of it, okay? A lot of masters paint with a little more gray or muted tone, and you just love their works because they're high quality. So I think that this was pretty close to nailing it. I'm very pleased with it, and I will take off the tape after a few hours of letting this dry. If you haven't checked my Instagram account on IGTV, which you can access through my Instagram account, I do the whole removing the tape ceremony there, so definitely check that out if you want to see more of these. I save it for exclusively there, just a part of removing the tape. Okay, so this is it. I hope you enjoyed this one, and let's wrap it up. So this is it. I really hope you enjoyed this process. I hope you were able to learn the same or similar lessons to the ones I learned. I guess doing the actual painting is a little different from viewing it, so hopefully you were still able to get a lot of value from it. I love how I was really worried in the beginning about this part here not working out as well as I wanted to, but then what ends up happening many times, and because I've seen this based on experience, I knew it's going to happen. What happens is you work on your center of interest or the focal point, and it kind of sends everything to the back, and then it works. And I had a feeling, which is why immediately after that I went straight into doing the cars and doing the trees and everything, because I knew that getting this center of attention is going to influence the entire painting and allow me to see it maybe in a better light and get it more accurate, because when you have the darkest values in here, you know what to compare the rest of the painting to. Okay, sometimes it can be tricky to paint a mid value, so blocking in or placing in the dark one helps you complete the scale. So in any case, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, because I did post all of this process, like snapshots of it there, and I'm also going to do the removal of the tape in the IGTV app, which is really, I think, entertaining to see the whole whoop and clean edges. So I definitely recommend you check it out there. Plus, I share like
quick spontaneous tips. So if I have an idea in mind, I just take the camera and go selfie and record myself real quick. It's not a long video, so it's good to just catch up and get a few quick tips along the way. So I would really appreciate if you go there and follow me. That's Liron IL. I'm gonna put the link in the description box, and also it's on my channel. You can find it. But in any case, I just want to thank you so much for watching the videos and for liking, and for anyone who subscribes to my channel. I really, really appreciate the support. I'm starting to up my content game, so I'm posting more here and more on Instagram and more on Snapchat too. I added everyone who added me as a friend on Snapchat. I added you back, okay? So if that's you, we're now friends. Officially, I'm really a Snapchat noob still. But in any case, your support means the world to me. I'm trying really as hard as I can to get to as many people and inspire as many people as I can. And having someone share my work or talk to their friend about it or just recommend a video means the world to me, okay? It really helps me in my goal. So thank you for enabling that. Thank you for your support. And I will see you again in another vid real soon.